Code of conduct. The Taliban sets its own rules of engagement in battling coalition troops, imposing restrictions on engaging foreign forces. Is it a PR campaign, a sign of discipline, strength, or weakness? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Garta. Welcome to the program. A rule book for Taliban fighters with 13 chapters and 67 articles. The pocket-sized book outlines what they can and cannot do. Al Jazeera has obtained a copy of the Taliban's new military code of conduct. Approved by their Afghan leader Mullah Omar, it offers a rare insight into the Taliban's structure, evolution and goals. James Bays has our exclusive report from Kabul.
As the Taliban have grown in strength in recent years, individual commanders have had a fair degree of autonomy, often deciding what operations to conduct and how to run the territory they control. Now it appears Taliban leader Mullah Omar wants to centralize the way the movement is run. A Taliban spokesman says all their fighters are being issued with a code of conduct, regulations that shed considerable light on the structure, organization and aims of the Taliban. Al Jazeera has been given a copy of the pocket book entitled The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan Rules for Mujahideen. The book, which states it's issued under the authority of Mullah Omar, says, creating a new Mujahideen group or battalion is forbidden. If unofficial groups or irregular battalions refuse to join the formal structure, they should be disbanded. The Taliban have repeatedly used suicide bombings across Afghanistan. This, the aftermath of a mass suicide attack in the eastern city of Khost 2 days ago. The new regulations make clear the circumstances when such operations should be carried out. The book says suicide attacks should only be used on high and important targets. A brave son of Islam should not be used for lower and useless targets. The utmost effort should be made to avoid civilian casualties. In the past, the Taliban have often taken hostages. These South Korean aid workers were held 2 years ago. There are now clear guidelines on how the Taliban will treat their prisoners. Whenever any official, soldier, contractor or worker of the slave government is captured, these prisoners cannot be attacked or harmed. The decision on whether to seek a prisoner exchange or to release the prisoner with a strong guarantee will be made by the provincial leader. Releasing prisoners in exchange for money is strictly prohibited. Among those being held by the Taliban, a US soldier, 23-year-old Bo Bergdahl, seen in this videotape released earlier this month. The new regulations say, if a military infidel is captured, the decision on whether to kill, release or exchange the hostage is only to be made by the Imam, a reference to Mullah Omar, or the deputy Imam. A legal expert says he's surprised by the sophistication of the document. He says the Taliban are even proposing trials for those accused of spying. In the past, they faced a summary execution.
They were just cutting their throat and writing on their chest that he was spying for Americans. And now they say we don't do this. Even if we doubt on a person that he is spying, we must investigate about him.
The document makes it clear it's the duty of every Talib to win over the local population. The Mujahideen have to behave well and show proper treatment to the nation in order to bring the hearts of the civilian Muslims closer to them. The Mujahideen must avoid discrimination based on tribal roots, language or geographic background. The Taliban say this document was written for their fighters, but it may also be aimed at a wider audience. Afghanistan is in the middle of a heated election campaign, candidates trying to sell their manifestos to the public. It may be that the Taliban is trying to use this document to give the Afghan people some idea of their plans for the future. James Bays for Inside Story in Kabul.
So does this code of conduct signal a shift in Taliban ideology, or are they hoping it might help increase their popularity with the Afghan people? Well, let's have a look at how the Taliban came about, as they are a relatively new entity. They were originally made up of ex-Mujahideen fighters and Pakistani-educated Afghans. In 1994, they helped Pakistan in creating a trade route to Central Asia. They were so successful in fighting the Mujahideen that they went on to take over Kandahar city, and by 1996, they'd taken the capital, Kabul. They were initially popular with many Afghans due to their hardline stance on crime and violence. Their stated aim was to set up a pure Islamic state and introduced their interpretation of Islamic law. By 2000, they controlled around 90% of the country. The Taliban developed close ties with Al-Qaeda, and after 9/11, they refused to hand its leaders over to the US. In October 2001, US-led coalition forces invaded Afghanistan and deposed the Taliban. But in recent years, the Taliban have enjoyed some resurgence in popularity, as many Afghans feel disenchanted by the foreign involvement in their country. Well, joining us today are our guests in Kabul, the former Afghan Prime Minister Ahmed Shah Ahmedzai; in Washington, D.C., Lawrence Korb, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress and former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Lawrence Korb, the Taliban, it would seem by this sort of document, have come full circle after 7 years. They were seemingly routed and then just a military force, but now it seems as if they're ready to govern again, at least in their own opinion.
Well, there's no doubt about the fact that they're trying to put a good face on their tactics, because with the increase of American forces, I think that the United States and its coalition partners will be able to take over more of the country and provide security. The Afghan people never liked the Taliban's methods that they used after they took over. And if you look at the film, the video that was shown in Pakistan of the Taliban whipping that young girl, that has hurt their image. And if you look at the opinion polls in Afghanistan, the Taliban are not very, very popular. So I think they're very concerned that their image is not what they would like it to be, and that's going to make it more difficult for them to prevail in the struggle with the increased coalition forces.
Yeah, you say, I mean, the fact that the Taliban seemingly wants to win hearts and minds, does it suggest the opposite? Does it suggest that the coalition forces have won the hearts and minds of the Afghan people? Surely that can't be the case.
No, it's not, but I think they recognize there is a potential. There's no doubt about the fact that the United States did not keep its promises to the Afghan people. President Bush proposed a Marshall Plan, and they never followed up on it. We ignored Afghanistan to focus on Iraq, and this allowed the Taliban to make a resurgence. But I think now that we're drawing down in Iraq, the Taliban recognize that we're going to put the right emphasis in Afghanistan, and this is going to help us get back, hopefully back to where we were in 2002. Also, we finally convinced the Pakistani government to move against the Taliban. So in my view, I think that they're on the defensive compared to where, say, they were a year ago.
Ahmed Shah Ahmedzai, would you agree that the Taliban is giving indications that they are on the defensive, which means that they have to issue booklets such as this, or is this actually a sign of the Taliban's strength?
No, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the new regulation issued by Taliban recently, and this means that they have understood the depth of the problem, and they have come to the idea that they should correct their past mistakes they committed, and this is a good step. This does not mean that they are under pressure of the coalition forces or NATO forces. They will not subdue to these pressures at all. This is their own understanding, and the criticism was going to them that we have to act according to Islamic regulation. And this is a very golden chance for them. And we had a difficult time with them to convince them. Among them also, there are different kinds of people. Now, when this regulation is being issued, this is a very good, and there's a good chance for both sides to negotiate, instead of that claiming that the military pressure made them do this. No, this is not correct. We should not approach the Afghan crisis at this angle, and we should be optimistic, and we should be hopeful for both sides to understand that if they are speaking, American gentlemen, that this is because of the military pressure, why we should not say that both sides, they have committed mistakes. Taliban committed mistakes in their rule, and now the NATO forces, American forces, have committed serious mistakes in the past 7 or 8 years. Now this is the time that everybody should forget about the past and come to the new negotiation, new understanding that the war is not in the interest of both sides.
Mr. Ahmadzai, what do you make of the timing of this? Do you think in any way that the Taliban could be strategically linking the release of this code of conduct with the elections that are just around the corner?
You know, election is a different topic. Even this code of conduct that they have issued, this is workable after the election. We know, everybody knows in Afghanistan, the present election, the new president will not change the war situation at all. War will be continuous, and it is good for the Afghan government and those who are the consultant to the Afghan government even to stop the election and come to the traditional Loe Jarga and comprise Taliban, Hizb Islami, all the opposition, to talk to them and run the election after the agreement of the opposition. All Afghans should participate in election that will bring stability and security to the country.
Lawrence Korb, Mr. Ahmadzai says that the Taliban's not on the defensive and that this sort of booklet is a good sign. I'm assuming you disagree.
Well, if in fact they follow it, it would be a good sign in terms of not killing innocent people with suicide bombers, not taking, killing hostages. That would be good, I think, for the Afghan people and for the coalition forces. But I do think that the fact that they're issuing it now at this particular time, given the Afghan election, given what's happened in Pakistan, given the reinforcements that NATO, particularly the United States, is making, as well as adopting a new strategy. I agree that, the coalition forces have made a lot of mistakes. As General McChrystal, who's now the new commander of the forces in Afghanistan, put it, we rely too much on airstrikes. I do think that this shows that they recognize that it's a different situation, and if they continue the way that they were, it's going to be more difficult for them to achieve their objective.
Mr. Ahmadzai, one of the interesting articles in this booklet states the Mujahideen must avoid discrimination based on tribal roots, language, or geographic background. I find that interesting because historically the Taliban's always been Pashtun dominated. It has discriminated against Tajiks, Uzbeks, quite openly against Shia Hazaras. What does it suggest now that the Taliban is making such a declaration to try and include all the ethnic groups?
Even from Taliban side, nobody has the evidences that they have gone through this discrimination issues. From the beginning, they were avoiding, and they have avoided this discrimination based on tribe, language, and even mazhab. They have not gone. Now, the problem is there is no one talker in the interest or on the behalf of the Taliban. I know them that they are not the people that they are with the discrimination. Discrimination is hated in Islam, is hated by any mujahid who is called himself a mujahid. Discrimination is not the way that we attract the people's attention and to dissolve our internal differences in Afghanistan. We know that in Afghanistan we have a combination of different ethnic groups, languages, and tribalism. And Islam is the only solution to avoid and to put deadlines and for all this discrimination. I do not blame Taliban in the past that they were discriminative people. Right now I don't, and what is now issued their code of regulation. This is welcomed and appreciated. I hope whatever is passed. Now we have to go and accept the new regulation, the new approach from Taliban. The coalition forces should take it serious that we should come to the ceasefire on both sides.
That's quite a tolerant and liberal characterization of the Taliban. I'm sure there'd be many who'd disagree with you. Nevertheless, Afghan President Hamid Karzai said he's willing to help Taliban fighters who aren't linked to Al-Qaeda reintegrate into society, but he had his conditions.
They change that, and if they don't adhere to that anymore, if they repent and regret and announce that publicly, then for the sake of peace, for the sake of return of complete peace to the country and a normal life, I'll be very much willing to do that, to talk to them.
And as the Taliban alters its tactics, there's a call from Britain's foreign minister for the coalition to do the same. In a speech at NATO headquarters, British Foreign Secretary David Miliband called for a political solution which includes dialogue with the moderate Taliban.
The first is a political strategy for dealing with the insurgency through reintegration and reconciliation. That means in the long term an inclusive political settlement in Afghanistan, which draws away conservative Pashtun nationalists, separating those who want Islamic rule locally from those committed to violent jihad globally.
Let's go to Lawrence Korb in Washington, D.C. You'd have heard what David Miliband said there and Hamid Karzai before him. What interests me and what I find a bit confusing is it depends on who defines it, right? Who defines what's a moderate member of the Taliban? How do you define this? How do you look at it?
Well, I think what President Karzai gave us a very good start when he said those members of the Taliban who are not committed to bringing Al-Qaeda back or working with Al-Qaeda. That certainly is a beginning. I think the next thing that one would have to take a look at is whether the individuals, the groups would accept the presidential election coming up and decide then who would run the country. And it wasn't just, Foreign Minister Miliband and President Karzai who said that. Ambassador Holbrooke said pretty much the same thing on BBC. And I think what they're looking for is to get those people who joined the Taliban, not because they accept their ideology, but basically because the government wasn't providing security for them or wasn't providing them a way to make a living.
Ahmed Zai, do you think that Hamid Karzai, David Miliband and Richard Holbrooke are all bluffing by calling for dialogue with certain elements of the Taliban?
The dialogue is very necessary. Unfortunately, President Karzai has not carried out a proper dialogue or understanding with Taliban. When he is speaking about the understanding with the Taliban, he always refers to those Taliban that they are already living under his control, and he is paying for their life and for their rent and for their expenses. And this is not the representation of Taliban. These Talibans who are living under the President Karzai's regime, they are admitting that they do not represent Mullah Omar, and Mullah Omar has also announced that they are not representing the Taliban side. What we want, we Afghan, we want to carry the most serious understanding negotiation with those Taliban who are under Mullah Omar's command and with those who are under Mr. Hekmatyar's command. These are the two main factions. They are opposing the government, and as far as we run several elections, this will never help Afghan people at all.
Mr. Ahmed Zai, what about those locals who are patriotic, nationalistic, good Muslims, but not inclined towards the Taliban, but they're also not convinced by Hamid Karzai's governments and the backing of the foreign forces? This sort of document that came out, this code of conduct by the Taliban, would it be able to attract or woo those people in the middle, neither supportive of Karzai or the Taliban?
The main problem is that all those who are claiming themselves Muslim, even if they are not related to Taliban, they are not contacted by any sources. This is not the country rule only for Mr. President Karzai or for Mullah Omar or for anybody else. The Afghanistan has everybody's opinion should be taken, especially when we come to the Islamic regulation, and Islam is a government. And this is not a property of Mullah Omar or Hikmatyar or me or somebody else. All Afghans, those who are concerned to bring peace and to establish Islam in this territory, they must be contacted. Their views and opinions must be appreciated. And this work has not been done, especially by the present government, which is the main responsibility of Mr. Karzai's government.
Lawrence Korb, there was a truce in the northwestern Badghis province between the government and the Taliban. The Taliban said it won't attack voting centres. Can that truce be replicated across Afghanistan in the short term, given that the elections are just around the corner?
Well, I think it can, and I think this is the direction that we ought to go. I mean, there was a truce, for example, in Pakistan, and then the Taliban broke it. I think that's really the key thing. If you make this truce, will they adhere to it? Will they live up to it, or is this just a short-term procedure for them to regroup? And I think that's the real issue here: is will they keep their word?
Ahmed Shah Ahmedzai, final question for you, sir. Are more troops still the answer? The more troops that come into Afghanistan, how will they be greeted and treated by the Taliban and others?
This will be a great mistake for all countries, those who are willing to send more troops to Afghanistan. More troops will create more problems, more killing, more casualties, and these forces will never bring peace and harmony to the Afghan nation.
And let's get Lawrence Korb's take on that very quickly.
Well, I think more troops will mean less killing, because with fewer troops, when the troops were surrounded by the Taliban and suffering losses, they had to call in air power. With more troops, you won't have to do that as much. And with more troops, you'll be able to remain in the areas that you clear, provide security and reconstruction, and keep the Taliban from coming back.
Yeah, but the fear is endless occupation, isn't it?
Well, not really, because I think while you're doing that, you're also training the Afghan security forces to get them up to the competence and the level that they can provide that. And I think in addition to this troop surge, we've also had an emphasis on increasing the size of the Afghan security forces. I mean, right now the Afghan security forces total are only 160,000. We're a country that's larger than Iraq, where you have 600,000 Iraqi security forces.
Gentlemen, it's been a great discussion. Thank you very much for joining us in Kabul. Former Afghan Prime Minister Ahmed Shah Ahmedzai, and in Washington, D.C., Lawrence Korb, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress and former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on this episode of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments, your suggestions, and your questions. You can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. There it is on your screen, insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye-bye for now.